record, and we will get started. So again, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Info Session Series 2024. My name is Terry Brooks Allen. I am the training manager at Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center, INRC, and I will be facilitating info sessions for 2024. I would also like to recognize other staff members that are with us tonight. We have our engagement manager, Danae Freeman. You'd wave your hand for us, Danae.
Hello.
So if you follow us on any form of social media and you think that work is awesome and it looks great, this is the person who's doing all the social media work for us. So Danae is doing an awesome job. So thank you so much. And she's also going to be our co-host for tonight. And we also have Sharon Logan, our Director of Neighborhood Services. And Sharon has been the face of the info session in the past. And Sharon, would you like to say a word or two?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Just wanted to welcome everyone. Appreciate you all for coming and spending your evening. Appreciate Leslie in the Community Heights neighborhood for all the work that you all have done and for sharing it. And I will say, Leslie, as you asked about recording, I've already had folks ask about it. Will it be recorded for those who are not able to make it? As Terry said, we had really great numbers for registration. And so even if folks don't make it in the email, they'll get information on how to find the recording, which is just really helpful, I think, for folks in their schedule. So thank you all for coming, and you're in great hands with both Danae, Terry, and Leslie.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much. So before I introduce our guest this evening, I did want to make you aware that we do have the closed caption and translation enabled this season. So that's an option for you to use this go round. All right, on to the important stuff. So tonight we have Dr. Leslie Schultz, the former president of Community Heights, to talk about traffic calming. During her two-year tenure as president of the Neighborhood Association, her executive board secured $150,000 in funding for two projects. One project was on East 16th Street in front of the Anna Brockhausen Elementary School 88. And the other longer project was on East 10th Street. The installations required securing both art in the right-of-way and tactical urbanism permits through Indianapolis Department of Public Works. With a background in engineering and higher education, Leslie was able to secure the required permits and work with her board to write, submit, and administer the grants that funded the projects. In her day job, Leslie works as a project manager, engineer, and commissioning agent. She enjoys using her expertise to solve real-world problems in mechanical, chemical, controls, and now civil engineering. I think she covered them all. She remains active on the Community Heights Board and looks forward to helping other organizations work towards safer public spaces. I present to you Dr. Leslie Schultz. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. I wrote that introduction and I was trying to balance, you guys should trust me because I have some expertise with you can do this on your own, but let me help you with what I learned over this 2-year process. I hope that introduction didn't scare anyone away. There are many traffic calming tactical urbanism projects all over the world done by a variety of groups, and they are very accessible for volunteer-led organizations at the local level to complete. We will talk a little bit about budget later, and there are lots of reasons why you do not need to secure 6 figures in funding for your project in your neighborhood. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to switch between the presentation and some tabs that I have open. I know an hour and a half is a long time to spend talking to anyone or spend listening to anyone. So I am hoping to get through this in about 55 minutes and then open it up to questions and answers.
Perfect.
Right? No, we've worked, right? We're not gonna do a full hour and a half of our presentation. Okay, so if I share screen 2, let's do that. And I am going to move into slideshow mode from the beginning. Okay, so this is an introduction to traffic. Go ahead. Okay, this is an introduction to traffic calming. Am I echoing?
Yes.
Also, Leslie, just so you know, we get to not only see your slide, but also your notes when you had it shared that way.
That's okay. We will do. I have unplugged from my screens. So I'm going to reshare as. Zoom. Share. Okay. How about now?
Audio is good, and yep, now it's perfect.
Yes, we're good.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to do 2 things first. I'm going to talk about the motivation for these projects, and then I'll do a quick run through of the results or the process and the results of our 10th Street project before going into exactly. Am I still echoing?
A little.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It's not horrible.
No.
What about now? Is that any better?
It does sound better.
Great. Okay, I changed this. Okay, our motivation for this project is to have safer public spaces. So for me, I had 2 moms that lived along 10th Street who told me that we had a problem with speeding and reckless driving right before I became president of Community Heights. And very shortly after these 2 women talked to me, I was walking outside and there was a crash directly in front of me while I was just trying to cross the street. And so those 2 things happening meant that I knew I had to do something. And so I made my time as the leader of the Community Heights neighborhood organization. I focused on traffic calming. At the same time, the Department of Public Works of the city of Indianapolis put out a policy called Tactical Urbanism that enabled us to install devices in the right of way and test whether or not those devices resulted in a better streetscape for everyone. So we're going to go through a little introduction to Community Heights, and then we're going to talk about the results, and we're going to compare what the street looked like before our Tactical Urbanism installation was put in place, and then after the installation was put into place. Community Heights is a suburban East Side neighborhood. So we are bounded by Emerson on the west, Arlington on the east, and we go from 10th to 21st Street. We're a mile by mile square we have both a younger and older population than the average neighborhood in Indianapolis. So we have more children and we have more senior citizens. Our senior citizens are more likely to be disabled than the average senior citizen in Indianapolis. And so this combination of low-wage workers with small children and our senior citizens with disabilities means we have 1 in 4 households in our neighborhood do not have a private vehicle. We've got a lot of people walking, a lot of people biking, a lot of people riding the bus. And this is characteristic of all of the major streets surrounding our neighborhood. They look like drag strips. So this is an image of 10th Street as it currently is in our neighborhood. There are 2 lanes of traffic, 1 in either direction. There's a wide center turn lane. In some locations, it's 16 feet wide, which is wide enough to park 2 cars right next to each other. There's a bike lane on either side, which is nice to have that space noted as for cyclists. However, because it's right next to the road, it just adds to this wide expanse of asphalt. There's also a sidewalk all along the Community Heights, the north side of 10th Street, and on part of the south side. Most of the sidewalk, though, is right next to the road. So it just adds to this effect, this drag strip-like effect, where we have a continuous expanse of pavement that induces drivers to exceed the speed limit. So we knew we had a problem. We got together with a city engineer. She came to our neighborhood meeting. She came with the design restrictions that she has. So one of them is the lane width that you must maintain for the largest fire engine to get through. That's 10.5 feet. She also came with minimum widths for concrete curbs. And we took that information and information about 10th Street itself, broke up into groups of 4 neighbors, and all 4 groups of 5 neighbors apiece designed a 10th Street where there was a center median with street trees and protections along the sides of the bike lanes. It's important to note these bike lane protections are not just for the bike lanes. They also protect the sidewalk. They also protect the neighbors' cars in their driveway, their gardens that they have out front, and their houses. We have had several houses hit along our 1-mile stretch of 10th Street. This was January of 2022. After 18 months of discussion with DPW, in July of 2023, we installed center turn lane street trees and water walls protecting the bike lane. We had these professional photos taken, and we'll talk about that later. This is a key piece for public perception of the success of your project, to get these really nice photos taken. We collected data before and after. This is a speed study, which we'll also talk about later in more detail, that collects the drivers that are able to choose their speeds, what speed they're choosing. The speed limit is 35. Each of these red squares represents a driver. The majority of drivers are exceeding the speed limit with the current design. With our boulevard style design with street trees in the center and lane narrowing protections for the bike lane, we see that the majority of drivers are now choosing to go just under the speed limit. So hopefully I can get that smooth transition. Isn't that nice? I'm gonna play it one more time. Wonderful. There's also this 85th percentile speed, which is a speed that DPW engineers requested we record for them, because it is what engineers will use to set speed limits. Before, the 85th percentile speed was 42 or 43 miles per hour. You pick the speed closest to this 85th percentile. And in that case, this road would be expected to have a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. No one actually very few people actually want the road to be 45. After we installed this, the 85th percentile became 36 to 37 miles per hour, which is appropriate for the residential street that we have. It fits the context of single and multifamily homes lining the street. It's not a major arterial. It is primarily used by folks who live on the east side. It is not a highway. Before the installation with the drag strip that we found the majority of drivers, and we had more than 200 responses, felt unsafe driving or walking or biking or riding the bus. No one likes this street. Afterwards, the majority of drivers, walkers, bikers, and folks riding the bus said they felt safe. They reported that center turn lane passing, 488 responses, 86% of those nearly 500 people said center turn lane passing had been eliminated. And 72% said that drivers were more frequently following the speed limit. And then the big takeaway from this, and the part that I hope inspires you to do a project in your own neighborhood, is that in the year prior, the 3-month period that we had the barriers out, there were 30 crashes. For the 3-month period the next year, when we had the barriers out, there were only 8 crashes. This means 3 out of every 4 crashes on 10th Street is preventable. This means that we can go from having a crash once every 3 days to about once every 2 weeks. This is simply pulled from IMPD. We did not record this. The Department of Public Works delivered it for us. It is so satisfying to see an independent agency show that our work made our street safer for everyone. Okay, so with that was a successful project we did. That is why I want you to trust me as I walk you through how you can do your own project. So the rest of our presentation is going to focus on just what is tactical urbanism? What are some of the examples of it? Hopefully you've already got an idea of where you've got problem spots for driver behavior, and you'll find something in this presentation that might work to solve that problem location. We'll talk about the permits that are available. We will primarily focus on the tactical urbanism permit. It is a little more involved, or it's the more involved permit. However, the other permit that you can secure is the art in the right-of-way permit. That one's easier, it's a little shorter, but we'll talk about the pros and cons of both. If you can put together a tactical urbanism permit, you can certainly put together an art in the right-of-way permit. And then at the end, we'll do a question and answer process, or a Q&A. All right, just a couple of terms. I hope I haven't used them yet. One is a public right-of-way, or ROW. This is a space controlled by effectively a larger entity, usually a government. It is oftentimes a road. Sometimes it's privately owned, a sidewalk, a driveway, curb cut. However, it is on a path that the public can use. We'll talk about the Department of Public Works, or DPW. That's the city department that maintains our roads, our trails. They also do our trash service. They also do our stormwater. These are the folks that will be reviewing your permit application, and we want to stay on their good side. And then the two important terms here, and there are many definitions floating around the internet and in our communities. How I define them is traffic calming is physical changes that limit poor driving behavior. They limit excessive speeds or reckless driving or driving that is just not good, weaving in and out of traffic, weaving in and out of lanes, racing, those types of behaviors that make it uncomfortable to be in our public spaces. Traffic calming is also changes that make the right-of-way better for everyone. It does make it safer for drivers. It might also make it more attractive to be on the sidewalk. It might create a gathering space for the neighborhood to center itself around. Then we're also going to talk about tactical urbanism. So tactical urbanism can result in traffic calming. However, it's not permanent. All tactical urbanism installations have the goal of getting something permanent installed, but they are always temporary community-driven experiments. And I use the word experiment because you have to collect data before and after and see if anything changed. So these experiments, the goal is to test if a design change makes it better for everyone. We want to see our spaces be safer. We want to see them be used more effectively. There's a lot of different goals that we can have in the tactical urbanism process. We just need to make sure before we implement this experiment that we do see that we do collect the data that we would need to determine if the change pushed things in the right direction. All right, so in my mind, traffic calming is permanent. I really like this picture because it has a couple different traffic calming elements. One of them is a center median, which is something that the 10th Street project included. We've got trees, we've got shrubs, grass. The lanes are pretty narrow. There's a gutter here, but it's not like there's an additional 3 to 5 feet for a car to pull off on. There's a bump out here, so we can see that the road widens for parking after this crosswalk, but the distance that someone using this crosswalk would have to take is actually shorter than if they crossed where the parking is on either side of the street. This signals to pedestrians that this is a good place to cross because you're going to interact with cars in a minimal fashion. We see in a lot of places around the city of Indianapolis where the crosswalk is at an intersection where a left or right turn lane has been added, and the crosswalk is actually at the widest point in the road. That does not signal to a pedestrian, you should use this space. That exposes the pedestrian for a longer time frame to cars by adding those additional lanes, by putting the crosswalk where those additional lanes are. There's also a change in the materials and colors of this crosswalk, which really breaks up that tunnel vision that a driver might have towards a vast expanse of gray asphalt or drag strip-like effect. I do have one small critique of this one. This crosswalk could be raised. A speed table is a raised flat surface. It is much wider than a speed bump. We have a couple of those around Indianapolis, but that would further induce cars and drivers to slow down and pay attention. There are other examples. I've got the speed table here. There's the bump outs that we talked about. There are parklets. I have where you can find all of these different examples listed here at the bottom. There's a traffic circle and I can't say it right, chicane, where the road curves left and right. And kind of has this smooth winding fashion that snaps drivers out of the zone, like kind of zoning in to just driving straight forward. It requires a little more attention to navigate. So tactical urbanism is temporary. The goal of tactical urbanism is to get those permanent changes, assuming the tactical urbanism works. So there's a little bit of this cycle where a neighborhood says, hey, I want a protected bike lane. So they complete a test, a temporary test of a protected bike lane. They collect data before and after that bike lane is installed. And then, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, the data says, yes, there should be a bike lane there, and they get a protected bike lane. I've got an example here, and I wanted to pull this out because this is what inspired this image here of a traffic circle, inspired our center turn lane street trees. So I do want to note that if you choose to use trees in your own project, the trees need to be watered every day, especially on days where the temperature exceeds 75 degrees. So the streetscape temperature is oftentimes 20 to 30 degrees warmer than the reported temperature. And so these dry out very quickly. I don't want to see anyone think, oh, I can install a tree and then leave it there for 3 months. The tree will die very quickly. You got to keep them watered. I want to do a little bit of a sidebar to the art in the right-of-way permit. We have also secured those at Community Heights. These projects, or this art in the right-of-way permit that we installed, was to install a mural in the entire lane of traffic in front of Anna Brockhausen Elementary School. And I have an image here of one of the sections that we've installed. The school mascot is a bee. And so we put a giant bee right in the center. This type of material has reflective beads in it. And those reflective beads light up at night. And so you really have a nice indication to drivers whether it's daytime when you see the bright colors or nighttime when you see all these reflections, that this is an area where you need to pay attention. Art in the right-of-way permits don't require any data collection. However, they also aren't meant to induce permanent changes. So we have found that the mural alone did not seem to slow people down. It does cause people to pay attention, which is good. However, a lot of our problems around speeding and reckless driving are not solved with just paint. There's got to be something else, some other component in the road. Also, as of summer 2023, the Department of Public Works will not issue a permit for crosswalks. So you can find lots of examples of really cool crosswalks in cities across the nation. However, at least as of this summer, that was not allowed in Indianapolis. You can paint the whole lane though. You can paint the whole intersection. Just keep that in mind when you're planning projects. In order to inform whether or not we should install a permanent change, whether or not millions of taxpayer dollars should be used, we have to collect data. I have put the 3 pieces of data that we collected at the top, before and after. We collected speed data in the form of a speed study. We also asked the public, how safe do you feel? And then we had the Department of Public Works generously gave us the crash reports for the months that the project was out, the previous year and the year the project was out. There are other items that I wish we had collected. You can collect the number of drivers. So our crash data was incredible. We prevented 73% of crashes. There is no way that the number of cars dropped by 73% with our installation. The capacity of a road is determined almost entirely by the number of lanes. We did not change the number of lanes. There was still one lane going in each direction. There was also, we maintained the ability of drivers to turn left at neighborhood streets, so to get out of the lane of traffic and turn left. We also maintained the ability of every driver or every homeowner on 10th Street to get out of the travel lane and into the left-hand turn lane to make a left into their driveway. So we don't expect the capacity to change, but we don't have if the number of drivers changed because we didn't collect that data. You can also do a count of cyclists or pedestrians. And you can also, one of the really interesting comments we got back was that while our Tactical Urbanism project was in place, it was so much quieter for neighbors. Neighbors reported being able to have a conversation on their front porch, being able to talk with their neighbors in their driveway, and just in general sleep better because the noise level from the road was so much quieter. Now we know that because speed, an increase in speed results in louder car noises. The friction of the tire on the pavement just creates more noise. However, we don't actually have like a graph that we can show. And there are very simple apps for Android and Apple that you can use to measure what's the sound over a 5-minute period or an hour, and then graph that and see how it changed. One thing I do want to note is that especially after when you're surveying public perception, be sure to collect name, address, and email. In the before, I don't believe we received any fake survey results. About a third of them had unique comments on them. None of them were identical to each other. The rate at which we got them was very organic. Afterwards, we received thousands of identical comments. Some of those were very easy to see. Other times we received comments that were similar enough in caps lock and style and comment that we believed they were similar, and those folks declined to provide their name, address, and email. So we just discarded them if we couldn't prove they were independent people submitting comments. All right, the speed study that I showed you earlier, we talked a little bit about it. We're going to talk just a little bit more about this particular data piece that is extremely valuable to engineers. So speed is recorded with a speed gun. I've shown a Bushnell device that you can get on Amazon. It costs about $100. You are welcome to borrow ours. And then there's a worksheet that goes with it. And it's extremely helpful to have 2 people perform the speed study. One person operating the speed gun and another one recording the values and keeping track of how many values or how many driver speeds you've recorded. You only record the speed of the driver choosing their own speed. So if you have a line of 5 cars and they're all one after another, like ducks in a row, you only record that lead driver, the pace car, because everyone else, they might want to go faster, but they can't. And so they are not useful from a how fast do drivers feel they should be going, because they're limited by that pace car. You fill in each square with the speed. In our case, the slowest speed we recorded was 24 miles per hour. The fastest was 51. This worksheet, though, can go much farther or much slower or much faster. You also record vehicles in both lanes of traffic. So those going east and those going west. If it's a north-south road, you would record vehicles going north and vehicles going south. This is because the road might have different features that cause drivers to go slower or faster. If one lane of traffic is wider than the other, if there's a hill, if drivers are approaching a hill, they tend to slow down as they go up the hill. If they're going down a hill, though, they tend to go faster. So we want to record just exactly what is happening in that lane of traffic. You record 50 going east and 50 going west to make the math easy on that 85th percentile. If you record 50 in each direction, then to get that 85th percentile speed that engineers use to set speed limits, you just count back 15 cars from the fastest car, and that's your 85th percentile. If you have more than 100, it's not a big deal, but it does mean that you have to figure out just what is the 85th percentile versus 100, count back 15, there's your number. Okay, so with that was the part of our presentation where we talk about what's out there, what ideas you might use that you might want to apply to your neighborhood. Now we're going to get into the very, very practical. I've got a road, I've got an idea, I want to see how I work through this permit process. Now, some of this is going to be very positive, and some of this was great fun. Small portions of it are going to be slightly negative, just like those bots that we got hit with. I want to assure you that I would do this project over again 100%. And I would do it so much better because of everything I've learned. So you're already starting at a higher point than I am. And you're going to be even more successful than Community Heights was at this project. So Samantha Alba asked, is it 100 cars total or 100 in each direction? It's 100 cars total. So 50 to the west and 50 to the east. And I will distribute this worksheet and the instructions to the speed study. It will be with this presentation, or at least I hope. Terry, please confirm for me. If I package all of this information in a Google Drive link, can we send it out to all the participants?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So I don't expect you to remember all of this. And watching this, you know, after you've seen it once, maybe you're not interested in that, but I have about 8 to 10 specific files that I want to make sure that you guys have as you go through your own project. I'll include a Word document with our early permit application. So if you just want to go through and delete the figures and add your own, that's perfect. You can do that. I'll include the George Julian 57 one pager that they put out to let the community know what was going on. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And then there's just a few other items that I thought would be extremely useful to have, so you're not reinventing the wheel that we had to. Okay, so first step, you are going to need a team. We had about 400 volunteers over the course of 2 summers install these murals, decorate the barriers, install the barriers, maintain the barriers, water the trees, plant the trees. It was a big project. You do need a lead. Your lead could have any of the skills listed, but it would be extremely helpful to have these first 3 people be different people. You have to have one person to organize everyone. Any day of events that you host, it's extremely helpful to have a second in command, someone who can talk to the press, sign in volunteers, answer questions, direct people to different tasks. It is also helpful if you have someone with some computer skills. They don't have to be an expert, but these projects do require public input. So you need to advertise surveys or meetings. You need to collect information and put it in a format that's easy to understand. So someone with experience with Canva or creating advertisements, someone with experience creating Google Forms or surveys through another some piece of software, and then someone with PowerPoint skills, the ability to take screenshots and add shapes to them, just some very basic PowerPoint and Excel and Google software skills will get you a long way. And if it's not the team lead, that can be really helpful. I've also got some optional team members that I want to talk about just in the briefest way, because these are really important people for the success of not only your project, but the larger tactical urbanism field and policy at the city and state level. So the number one optional team member I have is a press contact. Reporters are your friends, and they are also not your friends. So the press wants a juicy tidbit. And if you use this project as an opportunity to maybe say something negative about the Department of Public Works, they will publish that. And that is a very short-sighted goal. You want the Department of Public Works to say, your project works, and we would love to pick that up as a permanent solution to speeding and reckless driving in your neighborhood. So you want to make sure when you're talking to a reporter that you stay positive, that you talk about your project in the most glowing manner, that you don't make it about punishing drivers. That's not what it's about. Tactical urbanism is really about creating safe, comfortable public spaces for neighbors. There's lots of resources out there on YouTube. I am not a public relations person by training. I watched a very short couple videos, and then I just got better at it as time went on. The number one piece of advice I would say is you do not have to answer a reporter's question. You can kind of tell when they're trying to get a negative comment out of you, and you can simply just keep repeating the positive things about your project. Neighbors coming together to help tackle a problem that they see in their neighborhood. All right, press contract. It's also extremely helpful if you have 2 or 3 people who are good at the press. Be asset-based. That's right, Beth. Be asset-based. You'll attract more bees with honey than vinegar. If you have 2 or 3 people, that can be extremely helpful. We had a very small group of people, not like our project. And when the press interviewed this, again, tiny group of people, they had a couple people say, here is the people opposed to the project. And then because I was the only one that knew exactly what was going on, I didn't have 2 or 3 people ready to talk to the press as a rebuttal. So what went out was, hey, 2 or 3 people hate this project, and the organizer liked it, but there was no indication of the hundreds of people that showed up in the July heat to do effectively hard labor in this very hot streetscape. That was not captured. So help yourself out, have a couple people, and let's really keep this a positive community building thing. Let's keep that image front and center. Having a social media person is another great person to have. Social media is incredibly negative, but it is a great way to reach people. And you got to have at least a presence. We'll talk a little bit more about getting information out, However, having a person who's really good at staying positive, sticking to the facts, and just anybody that maybe missed all of the meetings, being very kind and generous to them and explaining, hey, this is a neighbor thing. We know speeding's a problem and we're just trying to do something. We'll get you a long way. A grant writer, of course, that's a lovely person to have. A translator is also, you know your neighborhoods. If you have a large immigrant population, it might not be Spanish that you need a translator for, maybe you need Burmese. Having that person to get everyone involved is a wonderful thing to have. And then you will collect partners as you do these projects. I think at the end we had like 22 partners that worked with us in some capacity on this project, keeping all of those people informed of, hey, come out, help us out, is a job in its own. And so having one person that's just the touch point and getting things, making sure that each partner is invited can be its own job. So again, start with 2, maybe 3, build on this as people say they're interested. The next thing you need to do is identify a location, and maybe identify is not, maybe you've already got one in mind. You need to do a check on the location to make sure you can install something there. So I'm going to click on these 2 graphs. I realize I didn't define this particular abbreviation. So IMPO is the end of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Planning Organization. Wow. And they are like they take all the federal money for road funding, or a lot of it, and distribute it out to the 9-county area. So they have 2 really useful graphs for us. One of them is the Central Indiana incapacitating and fatality crashes. These are crashes that sent someone to the hospital or someone died. It doesn't tell you how many fatalities happened in a crash. So the point on this graph, and we'll click this. Do we see the MPO graph? Or do we still see the PowerPoint? No, we don't see it. Okay, I'm going to stop the share and then I'm going to share again. Share. We are back at the MPO crash dashboard. Cool. Now we see the crash dashboard. Yes. Great. Okay. This dashboard shows, again, every crash where someone went to the hospital, or the ones with red circles where someone died or multiple people died. We're going to go over to my neighborhood. 10th, 21st, Arlington, Emerson. We see 10th Street, or all of our boundaries, or the major roads through, this is 16th Street, are where people die. Arlington, which until recently was where our grocery store is, our hardware store and a pharmacy on both, we have a Walgreens and a CVS, are where our deadliest intersection is. So you see this repeated across many neighborhoods, that yes, there are incapacitating crashes in these smaller areas where you have more neighborhood streets, but they're far fewer than as you zoom out these major, or they're called minor and major arterials. So these streets are good candidates for making real change. However, I can already tell you that some of these streets are going to be extremely hard to get the Department of Public Works to issue a permit. I'm going to stop my share again, and we're going to go to a different IMPO graph. So the next one, go back to my presentation, is called the Traffic Safety Risk Score. And Zoom share. Again, this is from the IMPO, that Metropolitan Planning Organization. So we're going back to the Community Heights neighborhood. We have 10th, 21st, Emerson, and Arlington. You see the green represents a low risk. The yellow is a little higher. The orange is even higher than that. And then the red, the stark red, are the absolute worst sections, those with the highest risk. So if, and this is a little fiddly, but if you go in and click on one of these sections, it will tell you it's called functional class. If it's a minor arterial, we were given a permit for that. That means you can get a permit for that. There's also, if you scroll down here, the AADT, and that is the average annual daily traffic. So it's how many cars can you expect per day on this road? For 10th Street, the one that we were issued our permit for, it was 9,539, or we're going to round up and say 10,000 cars. We also got one in front of Anna Brockhausen, which unfortunately is one of the more dangerous roads. It's another minor arterial. It only sees 7,800 cars per day. And I'm going to screw up here. You see how the whole map turned yellow? That's not what you want. That gets you a different layer. So it's kind of fiddly. This particular neighborhood street, which is green, only sees 500 cars per day. All right, so we know 10th, 16th, those are available. If DPW pushes back on you and says that's too busy of a road, tell them Leslie Schulte is helping you out and get me in on your permit conversation. We'll talk to you. We'll talk to them about it. Now, a road that I was not, or a road that maybe would be a lot harder to secure a permit on, especially a first time, would be a principal arterial, a main arterial. This is Shadeland. It's one of the more dangerous ones. It's a great place to possibly make change, but it sees 30,000 cars per day, 3,000 times as many, 3 times as many cars. That is going to be a very dangerous place to work in, especially for volunteers, and there's a lot of traffic. I'm not saying you can't. That was my street. Oh, thanks, Beth. I'm not saying you can't go after Shadeland. I'm just saying that's going to be a harder, especially for a first-time project. Minor arterial, less than 10,000 cars per day, AADT. Okay, stop my share one more time, guys. Just one more time of this switching slideshow. Okay. And I've got that information listed in the PowerPoint you received, so no need to remember that this is the number that you need to be looking for. One note I do have, both of our projects were on the so-called minor arterials, slightly more intensive spaces than your neighborhood streets. After about a year of talking with the Department of Public Works, what I learned was you must install traffic control devices on these roads. There's lots of very cool traffic calming projects out there that have planters and artwork and just lots of neat things. I was not able to secure a permit for planters. That was our first idea. And so we had to circle back and use this diamond pattern with the water walls and put a tree in the center. We still got the effect of greenery being added to the street, but we did get some negative feedback about barriers being ugly, not liking the artwork. The work is so important. We prevented 3 out of every 4 crashes. In terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is at the bottom and attractiveness is at the top. So I would argue, even if it's a little, it's kind of a bummer that we have to stick with these traffic control devices on these major arterials, which are more dangerous on average than our neighborhood streets. They are still worth using, and there are things we'll find out later that you can do to get public support for these devices. Again, we did the minor arterials. On roads with less traffic, those neighborhood streets, you are more likely to have a more expansive list of materials, planters, artwork, sculptures, things like that. And so if you're interested in doing that, please go for it. Please let us know what you're able to secure. We're going to talk about the permit process now, and then we're going to go into a little theory of permits. So the Department of Public Works has a policy. It's 11 pages long, and it describes the permit process. I would recommend you read this, but I have summarized it for you. This, as an engineer, I was very good at getting permission. That is my expertise. I got a lot of complaints about artwork. I personally thought we did a great job. It looked amazing to me. I am not an art director, though. That is where I failed. Maybe you are an art director, or maybe your organization is extremely beautification focused. That is great. Let me help you with this process so you can focus on that part, because that was really, if there was one thing I could change, we would have spent 1 month talking about the permit and 17, maybe not 17 months, 6 months talking about the artwork. That didn't happen because we spent so long securing the permit. We had to get the grant funds. So we had to get the grant spent. And so we shaved a little time off that discussion of artwork, which is extremely important to the public. Okay, so 11 pages, there's a link here. I'm not going to click on it because I don't want to switch back and forth, but we are going to go through each of the major sections that your permit will have to have. And again, you will get our final successful permit so you can copy paste sections that are appropriate for your permit. Okay, there are 1 of 4 slides, and these have a lot of text, and I am very sorry. And we are at 1 hour. So I'm going to go through this quickly with the knowledge that there is another session planned for the Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center, Power Indy, where we are going to have worksheets where you will go through and fill out the permit. And the goal of the workshop that I'm hosting there is that you can take those worksheets and turn them into DPW and get approval. All right, we got a link to that Neighbor Power Indy in the chat. Sign up. There's a couple of them that will be good for, and we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. Okay, key permit sections, 1 of 4. The big thing is you have to put the applicant identity. Do not put your home address. Some people are very angry about these projects, and my favorite angry people about these projects are the ones that tell you that they are angry because they can no longer drive in an illegal fashion. I can no longer drive down the center turn lane to get to the light, and I am pissed off about your project is just honestly hilarious. Those people don't need to know what your home address is, though. Please don't give it to them. You will need the location of where your installation is going to go. That's literally a street name, and it goes from this intersection to this intersection. You can use Google Maps satellite view to screenshot the area. So don't even have to go out into public to get this information. You will have to go out and take pictures of the roadway as it exists. This is called existing conditions, and you just take a picture of what's out there right now. You will also have to provide a written description of elements. You have to choose whether it's a demonstration or a pilot. A demonstration is less than 30 days or less. A pilot is 31 days or more. Please keep in mind that there is a tactical urbanism season, and these cannot be installed during snowplow season. So the first date that they're really allowed right now is April 1st, and any installation must be removed November or October 31st, so Halloween. It can freeze before October 31st, and especially if you're using the water wall barriers like we did, you might keep an eye on that. You might also think about folks will crash into these things and you will have to recover them. Or if you're using trees, you will have to water them every single day. So think about your organization's capacity to do that day after day. Ours was 3 months. I was so happy when it was over, but I'm so glad we went the full 3 months because it was such a change. People got used to that quietness. People got used to walking places that they had previously not walked because they were like, oh, wow, it's actually safe to be out here. And it's nice, it's not so loud, and I can be comfortable when I walk my dog. And it really kind of sets in, things can be different for the neighbors that live close to these streets. In your written description, it's great to include you'll have to include information about the materials. I have some that we included: the manufacturer, the color, the shape, the size. I just pulled from the website, effectively the manual on how to use this device, and stuck it in there. You'll also have to talk about the project goals. So you will want to I will also send the additional events in the follow-up email. Yep. So the project goals, they can be to improve safety. They can be to help drivers go the speed limit. They can be to increase the number of pedestrians, but whatever your goal is has to inform the information that you are collecting. You will also have to have a visual depiction of the elements. This is where Google Maps comes in so much handy. You go to Google Maps, you go to satellite view so you can see what the trees are, so you can see if there's a median, you zoom in, you take a screenshot, and then you use just squares and circles to drop them on that screenshot in PowerPoint. Super easy. You will have to have an installation plan. Again, installations are allowed during tactical urbanism season, April 1st to October 31st. And the part that tripped me up, because I am not a civil engineer, was this temporary traffic control pattern. It is not that hard, I have to say. I've never done one before. All they want to know is, will you have safety vests for volunteers? The answer is yes. They'll be working in the roadway. They need to have the bright yellow with the reflectors. We have some that you can borrow. And they will want to know that you're putting up flags that say either road work ahead, workers ahead, traffic pattern changed ahead. There's lots of different information you can put on these signs, and that those are placed ahead of the project so that when cars are approaching your installation, they know to pay attention. You can also use cones. There are grabber cones, which are the tall, thin, narrow ones. Those are the easiest to move large volumes around. They have a base that's heavy, and you can pull that off and then stack each of the tall, thin grabber cones together. There are also the traffic barrels, which are larger, and they have like a floppy piece of tire material that you toss over each of the barrels. You can only have so many of those in the back of a truck. And so I would highly recommend the grabber cones over the barrels. And I have not had any comments from DPW on a preference for one or the other. You do have to have a temporary traffic control pattern for installation, maintenance, and removal. We'll talk about maintenance here later. You can say same as installation. Just fill out the first one, and then every time you do maintenance, your volunteers will have a safety vest, and you will still have those signs out that say workers ahead. because those are going to be out the entire time that your installation is in place. And you might have cones around to just mark where the workers are performing the maintenance. Your maintenance plan. So there are two types of maintenance that you can have. One is foreseeable and one is what's called unforeseeable, and just means you don't know when it's going to happen. So foreseeable maintenance for us was trash, watering the trees, and replacing reflective tape that had some wear and tear as drivers would knock it, or as it was, especially the tape that sat on the bottom of the barriers to make them reflective. They got a lot of dirt and grime, and some of those started peeling off. So we had to replace those we had to inspect those with some frequency and then replace them. You can say they want to know the proposed frequency. You can say daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or as needed. There's also unforeseeable maintenance activity. We know people are going to crash into them, and we know that there's graffiti that happens. And so you just have to say, we'll remove the graffiti, or we'll remove the device that has graffiti on it in some timely manner within a week. For crashes within a day. And then for removal, you'll have to let them know when you plan to remove it. They do want to see them removed before November 1st. All right, last section, 4 of 4. This permit is a beast. You will have to describe your public input process. So talk about the meetings that you hosted to build consensus around what artwork you're going to do or where the installation was going to go. You'll talk about the surveys, put in a picture of here's how we advertise the meetings, here's how we advertise the survey. List your partners, list your funding sources. We got a lot of letters of support from IMPD, from the hospital in our neighborhood, because those are the folks that are the people that respond to these crashes. They do not want to see them any more than we do. We got our city county councilor, the Marion County Health Department. If you can get the Indianapolis Fire Department to write you a letter, that would be an excellent coup. We have not gotten a letter from that particular emergency service. However, we have been very careful to maintain that 10 to 11 foot, that 10.5 foot lane width required for the largest fire engines. So if you've got a connection there, please, 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 please work that connection to get that letter of support. That would be very cool. You can also have optional appendices. They don't request any of them, but if you've got a manual on a material or a drawing that the manufacturer provides, if you want to PDF the survey, or if you're using Google Forms, you can print to PDF. You can include that in there. Any promotional materials that you use, flyers, yard signs, etc. Those are the permit sections. So you'll have to have them. They can be a variety of detail levels. I have heard that the permit that I have had more detail than you need. So take that with a grain of salt. I do want every single person to know that every permit application is a negotiation. If the first answer is no, don't stop. That just means come back with a modified plan. It doesn't mean no forever. There are some items that, as I help other groups do these projects, I am going to slowly try to chip away at the no to get a yes. I've listed 4 items here, and the first 3 are probably doable, okay? It's just gonna take time. It's gonna take the people that care and that are doing this in a very thoughtful way and keeping their relationship with the Department of Public Works good, asking these same questions. So right now, we are not allowed, or at least as of this summer of 2023, we were not allowed to attach items to the road surface. It is possible to repair the road surface when you remove the item. Other cities allow this. It would allow us to add parking stops, those concrete small concrete mounds that you see in parking lots, and those require next to no maintenance because when cars hit them, they don't move. The barriers, when cars hit them, they shift around. We had one person, they must have creamed into them at an incredible speed because they ripped them apart and they flew everywhere. That won't happen with something bolted to the surface. We could also add attractive bollards, delineators. There's a bunch of items. So I really hope we get this. The other thing is you have to have them down by November 1st. And Halloween is when we have a bunch of kids out in our public spaces on the sidewalk. And it would be really nice to have these installations, especially the ones that are proving to make things safer, to be out when we have all our kids out. And then crosswalks. Crosswalks are not allowed right now. One of the reasons is because crosswalks need to be ADA accessible. You can't just put a crosswalk anywhere. You need to be able, a blind person needs to be able to use it safely. Someone in a wheelchair needs to be able to use it safely. And so, but there are crosswalks that exist that could be better if they were wider, if they were painted in a way that was very, very, very bright and attention-getting. But right now, that is not the case. And then this last one is maybe not. I have a little bit of faith that it might happen with the right people, but Emerson, Shadeland, Keystone, Raymond, Crawfordsville, these are our big, fast roads, and they are our most dangerous roads. And right now, because they have so many cars on them and they're so dangerous, I don't see a neighborhood organization getting the ability, the permit to do something on these roads, but these are the ones that need it the most. Every permit application is a negotiation. If you take one thing from this, that is the one that I want you to take. All right, liability. Buried in the policy is that the applicant is fully responsible. I am not a lawyer. This is not lawyer advice. This is just, I want to make sure everyone is protected. You will want a general liability policy with directors and officers insurance. It was difficult for me to secure this for my organization by myself, so I went with Irvington Insurance. It took them about 2 weeks to do it, but this is a good policy to have. It's less than $1,000. And then at events, have volunteers sign in with some language around. They acknowledge that this is work in the right of way and that there is always a chance of danger and that the organization is not liable if anything happens. All right, materials, we know that it gets approved. Man, I'm so sorry, we're still going. Traffic control devices, I have these barriers. There are these heavy duty cable ramps that can get some, like a bump on certain roads that aren't super fast. There are cones that come in very pretty colors. There's reflective tape that comes in all the colors of the rainbows. There are also these coatings that can create big colorful patterns. We have materials that you can rent or borrow, the speed guns, the traffic safety devices. This is why you do not need $150,000 to do the exact same thing we did, let alone do a different project that might have materials that might also use these materials. We had this cool tropical leaf pattern. Some people didn't like it. You could borrow our barriers and paint them whatever color you want, have whatever pattern you want on them, do a sunset. I don't care, just please rent these from us. I will send a Google Drive link with our successful permit and a bunch of other information mentioned in this presentation. The Department of Public Works is now matching dollar per dollar the Tactical Urbanism and Art in the Right-of-Way projects. So even if you did the exact same thing we did and you bought all this stuff brand new, you would only need to get $75,000 to do the exact same thing. You can also rent these barriers from us. Please do that. We want to see them used. There are a couple of lessons learned, and I am not going to bore you with this. The only thing I would add is that I've highlighted in italics that what we did not do and I wish we had done. So visit your neighborhoods, advertise your meetings, put up yard signs, get a professional photographer, but make sure you deliver 30 days before the installation to each house and business bordering the installation. Here's what we are going to do. Release a one-page summary. This Safe Routes to School from George Julian School 57 will be in the packet that I send you. Have a website with a question and answer or frequently asked questions ready to publish before you install everything. The night that we installed everything, I was then like frantically typing, trying to get the social media questions that were coming in. On there, and there was no reason I could have done that ahead of time. And then the two items that are the two pieces of data that we could not collect, we talked about it earlier, sound levels with just a phone app, and then this traffic tally device costs a couple $100 and would let us know how has the number of cars changed with time, and just ensure that our crashes didn't decrease because traffic volumes decreased. There's the list of funding. We received funding from the first three. We also applied for these last two and didn't receive it. There's less competitive and more competitive here. We want to thank these people, especially who made it happen. They gave us the funding to implement our tactical urbanism projects. We've got to thank our partners. What's next? Neighbor Power Indy. I do want to point out Help by Design, this is Help by Design, and the Department of Public Works is hosting their own infrastructure talk. And I will be there because I want to learn what's changed since we did ours and hear about that sweet match that they've got, that matching program. And then I will be hosting the second one, Decoding Indianapolis Tactical Urbanism Permit Application, where we will be creating our own permit application for submittal. Attend this workshop, attend both of them. You can register here. All right. 10 more minutes, guys, 10 more minutes. I hope I didn't bore anyone.
I don't think you did. The numbers were steady the whole hour. Yes, the numbers were steady the whole hour. So that was great information. Obviously, people are definitely interested. They're already talking about renting your materials. So, and then also, thank you so much for the plug for NPI, Neighbor Power Indy. That's awesome. I think your session is going to be at capacity. So, and Health by Design session as well. So thank you so much. So we will open it up for questions. Yes, we have a few minutes for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please come off of mute.
Hi, I have a question for Leslie. My name is Samantha Elba. I'm on the northwest side of Indy in the Crooked Creek neighborhood. And I have been working with the Parks and Rec Department, and I got in touch with someone from DPW regarding Grandview Drive. We live in the neighborhood. It's kind of a combo between a neglected park in the back corner called Fox Hill Manor, and then safe and accessible access to get to certain parks in our neighborhood. Grandview Drive does not have any sidewalks. It's extremely unsafe. And I guess when you have Park and Rec and DPW kind of saying, yeah, this is most likely not going to happen, do you still try to say, okay, let's go back to the negotiation phase? And again, this is very new for me. This was something that I just kind of taken on by myself and want to learn more, and hoping to get the community more involved and, on the bandwagon of safe and accessible transportation and mobility. So I guess my question is, even when you have two organizations and entities saying, this probably won't happen, is there still a light at the end of the tunnel that's like, well, this can happen?
So the road you said, and let me write this down. You said it's Crooked Creek.
So we're right, Grandview Drive is the beginning of Crooked Creek. It's on the west side of Indy, and it's Kessler Boulevard, and Grandview is going to be that intersection. There are no crosswalks there at all. And yeah, I just know in our neighborhood, we do have quite a few senior citizens and children. And yeah, it's just not accessible to any other place or space in Indy, or to Juan Solomon Park, or, certain parks in our side of town.
So when I look at Grandview Drive and Kessler, I see a perfect opportunity for some malicious compliance. So you can't paint the crosswalks, but what if you paint the curve or the shoulder in like a straight fashion? I see an opportunity here. Okay, I don't think this is impossible. Maybe not a sidewalk, or maybe not a crosswalk. We already know they say no there, but there are those bump outs. There is the ability to paint the intersection and the areas on either side. You can also go for extremely temporary. So if you say, listen, we're just using waterproof paint, or not waterproof paint. Yeah, waterproof paint. And we're just going to do it for a weekend, and then it will wash away, but we'll collect that data. That can be a really, really nice compromise. So Samantha, would you email us at chnoindy.com, and we'll set up a meeting with them and just make sure that there's not something we can.
Oh, I love hearing that. Okay, I will
There's
definitely.
things we can do to make the crosswalk more visible, if I'm understanding this correctly.
So if
there is no crosswalk. So Grandview and Kessler, there's no sidewalks or crosswalks over there. And you see kids or just people trying to ride their bike along that shoulder, and this turning lane going from Grandview, if you're going north on Grandview, turning onto Kessler, you see people standing on that section wanting to cross, heading north on Grandview and hoping that they don't get hit in either direction. So that, and yeah, so these are not sidewalks, they are just the little shoulder there.
And so I could envision a world where you see this sharp, like kind of L shape, filling that in. So psychological, and putting temporary, just sticky bollards, so that cars have to drive forward and then make a sharp right turn.
I see. Okay.
Same thing over here, filling this giant space so that this distance is.
And I was just gonna add, I put it in the chat, but DPW telling our neighborhood that nothing was gonna happen is exactly what kickstarted us to do this project. Leslie and others were like, that's not an acceptable answer. So we just took matters into our own hands and did tactical urbanism.
Love that. Okay, I will definitely send an email. I know we're moving forward with things on Fox Hill Manor in the back corner there for Indy Parks, but my biggest worry was how people were going to access the park safely. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate.
All right, who was next? Was it Skylar?
We had a question in the chat. Let me see. It was from Connie. Says, will survey examples be in the information sent out?
Yes, I will send you a PDF of the first and the last survey, and you will be able to see like that little bit of personal information we collected, name, email, address, and then also just like how we put together, how safe do you feel walking, biking? You could copy entire questions, but it will be a PDF, so you would have to recreate it in Google Forms. There's not really a great way to export Google Forms questions.
I have a question about what happens after you dismantle your temporary installation.
Oh,
What is the procedure to turn it into a permanent solution after you've proven the need?
the first step after you tear it down is you go into a 2-week depression about how sad everything is. And then your house slowly gets put back together and you have clean laundry and food in the fridge at the same time. And you start to feel better about yourself and the world. And then there are 2 things that I would highly recommend you do. One is you host a public meeting. You give yourself 2 to 3 months to recover, depending on the scale. Maybe it's just a couple weeks. And you invite the press and the public and all of your partners and maybe buy them pizza and then say, look, this was so successful. That is a key. That is like maybe a very important part of this process. Folks will clap for your graphs. They want this, okay? This is the public facing part of this, is getting the constituents of your city county councilor and your state senator and your state rep to understand that the public spaces can be different and they can be for everyone. Then what you do is you turn over your data to the Department of Public Works. You also want to have a little gap between the project ending and the presentation. If you want crash data, they have to request that from IMPD, and IMPD has to compile it and send it to them. And so there's a lag time there. DPW has a policy where if someone does a tactical urbanism project in a space, the engineer must review the submitted data before they start their design. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean they have to use it, but they do at least have to look at it. And that is where the hope is that when each road comes up, we have a better design that better fits the neighborhood that it's in. But it is going to take time. I have, for my project, I've sunk so much time in it. 1 mile, which was the length of our largest project, is not enough to get federal attention. For that, you have to have a much bigger project. You might have to pair it with a couple different projects. And so I am at the point where I'm making the choice, and I will see if this is a good thing or not, to expand the 10th Street project to include the entirety of East 10th Street. So I have Springdale, Woodruff Place, Emerson Heights writing me letters of recommendation for the next round of grant funding that we will go for, Warren Park, Cumberland, so that we can say this entire stretch needs to be looked at holistically. And we need a full rethink, and we need to go after those federal dollars, because this is a big project, not just a 1 mile, 1 neighborhood project. You don't have to do that. I don't know if it'll work. I'm not there yet, but there is that. Somebody has to look at it when the road is redesigned, and it is an opportunity to create a network of people that understand what good road design looks like and has hope that there is a design that does work better. But you have to host that second meeting with the data release, or that last meeting.
That's making the assumption that the road is slated for redesign. If our location is not on any kind of a redesign plan, then are we just wasting our time and energy and grant money?
So every road will come up for resurfacing at some point. Yes.
Well, that's the duality between a major road will come up for resurfacing much sooner than a lesser important road, and they need the work just as badly. But, you know, they're much farther down the priority list.
Mhm. And so is your project, are you thinking a neighborhood street?
Ours is a situation of a very dangerous and ambiguous intersection where we would like to create a roundabout.
Oh, so very interested in that. You can totally borrow our barriers to, instead of a diamond pattern, having a circle
Make a
pattern.
circle. Yeah.
Yeah. You can do things with, so in the presentation, there is that transpo coding that is described. That will last. We are on our 2nd year of that coding, and it's starting to flake in a couple places, but the overall effect is that it's very bright and intense. And this is one where if you want a beautiful roundabout with a tree in the center and a mound of grass, that might take years. But if you paint that section and temporarily put up bollards, maybe you can get something faster, bollards attached to the surface, because the project might be 5 figures instead of a major redesign.
Right.
But I wouldn't lose hope there, because in that case, with intersections to roundabout, yes, the permanent curb might take years, but something that looks very close, that is permanent still, could happen. I don't want to encourage civil disobedience because I haven't done it personally, but drilling into the asphalt and putting a bolt on the bollard, those bollards are $200 a pop, and you need a drill, like a big one, but but do the process first, you know, paint bollards that just stick to the surface and see if it's, or see if it catches. I mean, Carmel roundabouts are called drunk catchers. So, right, people run into them and then their car stops and they don't hit a house or, God forbid, a person or something else. So great idea. Love it. I
Thank
wouldn't
you.
give up.
Okay.
Is it all right if we jump in here?
Oh, Skylar, what else? What do you have?
I have a question. It's probably more for DPW, but maybe you have worked with them enough to know why you have to do this in every locality where you want this to happen. Is there not data that shows that protecting bike lanes helps and bump outs help calm traffic and so on and so forth?
Yes. So we know that narrow lanes, that 10.5 to 11 feet, makes drivers nervous. So they pay attention. They feel that it's less safe, but it induces them to pay attention. So there are fewer crashes and speeds are more moderate. So when there is that crash, it's much less likely to result in a disabling injury or a fatality. I will say that I do think there is some benefit to, even though we know this researchers have gone over this, other cities have done this. We installed the center turn lane street trees in front of Anna Brockhausen Elementary School. And while it did slow a lot of drivers, we still clocked someone doing 51 in a school zone. We think the reason this is because the project wasn't long enough. We only had 4 trees there. It spanned 2 blocks, and it wasn't enough to make drivers nervous. There's also the widest point of the road is right in front of the school. We think we need to add a bump out in addition to the street trees to really cut down on those speeders. You only get one shot when your road comes up for resurfacing. And so getting those fine-tuned details where this didn't work well enough to be acceptable to our neighborhood means you get a second chance to say, well, what if we add this other element? Does that further reduce speeding and reckless driving? So iterative process is a good thing. You can really arrive at a neat design. No doubt, frustrating now.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
All right, Leslie, we are slightly over, so I definitely want to be considerate of our time. Great information, great presentation. And again, I definitely think you're going to have a very popular session for NPI coming up on March the 9th. So again, we definitely want to thank you for just being brave and doing the whole traffic calming project. And it has definitely been an asset to the community. And definitely the interest is there because again, the numbers are great for registration. And I think you're going to see really good numbers at NPI. So please don't forget to register for NPI, which is coming up March the 9th at Martin University from 9 until 3. And we will also have an evaluation going out after this session. And there will be a registration link for NPI on the evaluation. So again, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed presenting the information because it was definitely great information, great information. So thank you everyone for registering and definitely for coming out and giving Leslie your attention. And until next month, we will meet on March the 20th, and Indianapolis Community Land Trust will be the next information session.
That's
So thank
February
you.
20th.
I'm sorry, February 20th. February 20th, Indianapolis Community Land Trust will be the next info session. All right, thank you again, everyone, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, Leslie.
Yes.
Terry, you can stop the recording.